Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I want to do a review for you of this little guy. This is the Olight S2R Baton, although everything I say is pretty much the same for the S2 Baton anyways. The difference is just this recharging end cap there. I want to thank my buddy Jim for sending this little guy along. Let's do a quick size comparison here. This is a 18650 flashlight battery. This is a CR123. This is your standard AA battery like you'd find in a household. Right here, this is your Olight S1R Baton. This guy is your Olight S1 Baton. Here's your Phoenix UC35 light and your RegTac D25A, my personal favorite everyday carry light. So anyways, let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this particular flashlight. So on the good side, it is a flashlight, and it does put out some quality light. You get 4 modes plus a 10 cycles per second disco rave mode. But basically, you get a turbo mode for a minute at a time, which is 950 lumens, which is very bright, more than enough for outdoor use. High is 400 lumens, which is, again, good for indoor use and very bright indoors. Medium is 80 lumens, which will very comfortably light a small indoor room. Low is 8 lumens, and moonlight is 0.5 lumens, which is getting to be horror movie dark. But that's okay. If you're a mole person living under the subways for years and years on end, that moonlight mode is going to be more than sufficient for you, I suspect. So a little edge case, but you always want to make sure you cover the mole people in flashlight reviews. Moving along here. The run times on this guy are very nice. That's the main advantage you get with going with the bigger guy, the S2, over the S1. With the S1, the run times are, well, okay, it's about 3 times the run time on the big guy relative to the little one. On this guy, you get an hour in high mode. On this guy, you get 3 hours. In this guy, you get, let's see, 1.5 days on the low mode, and on this guy you get 5 days. That's kind of a beautiful thing. I appreciate very much that increase in capacity, and that's pretty understandable though, given that you're using a much bigger battery in the bigger light. Speaking of that battery, although this comes with a proprietary Olight cell which allows the recharging to happen, if you don't need to recharge, you can use any 18650 battery from any other flashlight, which gives you a little bit of flexibility, although it is frustrating that you can only recharge their cell. And so if that cell goes bad, you need to buy another one straight from them. The base on this guy, as with many other Olights, is actually magnetic. So you can see here. Oh, it's running away, but you can still see it's magnetic. And this is nice because it prevents it from rolling off of things, and you can also do things like, stick it to the hood of your car and you got light in the engine. It can be a very nice thing. And then the side switch is something that can be very nice in use because your finger is already going to be there as you're holding the light, so adjusting the light is pretty straightforward. I appreciate that very much. So, yeah, anyways, that's your good. You've got the side switch, the magnetic base. It uses any 18650. It's got much nicer run times than the small one, and it's still got pretty good light output. Let's talk about what's great. The greatest thing about this light in particular, which is not true of the S2 without the R, is that this light here is rechargeable. In the package comes a little Olight charger sort of affair, little USB sort of thing. You plug it in to one end on a USB charger like you'd use for your phone, and then the other end just magnetically attaches to the back of your light. I'm going to use a little USB power bank here so you get a sense of it, but basically this turns red when it's charging, and then it'll turn green when it finishes charging, which is nice. It gives you a very easy indication of what's going on. It's also stupid easy to plug in. I mean, seriously, this thing wants to be plugged in. You put it anywhere in the vicinity and it will plug itself in. That's kind of a beautiful thing. It seems like a little affair, but honestly, time spent fiddling with little cables, a little, sorts of flaps like this where you gotta fingernail it open and whatnot, then plug it in, that adds up. And after a little while, it's nice to just kind of pop it in there. It also uses the same charger for what it's worth as the smaller S1R. So you can have the same charger and charge both of these lights, which is kind of very nice. I'll say this charging system, more so than a lot of others, or than just using a conventional light with rechargeable batteries, is way more convenient if you charge your light every night. They even make dock sorts of versions where you drop the light into a little dock and then you grab it in the morning and it recharges it overnight. That makes this a very, very nice night shift sort of a light. Meaning you get home, in the morning after using your flashlight all night, it's partly run down. All you really got to do is toss it in the general direction of the charger and it'll start charging, no problem. And then you grab it the next day on your way out of town. And there's no real question. It's not like, oh God, I forgot to put a new battery in there, or oh, I didn't put the battery back in there, or oh crap, all the batteries I have with me. No, it's just, was it connected to the cable? Yes. Okay, then it's charged. Problem solved. So I kind of like the fact, by the way, when I just threw this off camera, if it tells you anything, it automatically attached itself to the S1R. That's the degree of magnetic coupling we're talking about here. Happy accident, if you will. But anyways, that's what's great. I do like this recharging system a great deal. And it's a really great option as a result for somebody who uses the light every night and wants to recharge every night. Let's talk about what's not so great about this, the bad. So on the bad side, first some nitpicks. This is yet another black flashlight. I don't tend to love black flashlights because this is something you're going to need to find in the dark, and they've made it entirely black. That's ugly to me. But I seem to be the only person who thinks this, so whatever. Next thing I gotta say is that relative to a lot of your 18650 sort of lights, the output of this light isn't all that stellar. It's not all that incredible. You're not getting huge lumen counts. You're not getting anything so impressive out of this light. It really feels like, in performance, it feels exactly like the S1R. Yeah, the turbo mode is a little bit brighter, but you're not in that very long. And on low mode, I really can't tell on high mode that is, I really can't tell the difference between the light output on these guys, except in duration. It's also relatively large relative to some of your other 18650 lights. For instance, your zebra lights and things like that. So it's not super impressive if you compare it to any other vanilla 18650 light from other companies. Next thing that kind of bugs me a little bit is the interface. It is time-based, which means that if you want to change the brightness of it, you hold the button down, and it'll cycle through all of those. And that means that you can't straightforwardly go straight from high back to medium or something like that. It's not the end of the world, but it does really increase the chance that you're going to be in the wrong mode. There are some shortcuts. If you keep the light on low most of the time, there we go, and the light is off, if you double-click, you immediately go up to your turbo mode. Or if you want to have a little rave, and I'll do this off camera, you can just triple click and it'll automatically go into disco mode, which is good if you want to do some popping and locking. So that's nice. Speaking of turning this guy on, unfortunately, because it's got this side switch, it's kind of easy to have this guy turn on in your pocket. There were a couple of times in EDC in this where, this is the same thing with the smaller one, where it automatically turned on and then blinded everybody else in the area. Not the end of the world, and it does have a lockout feature, kind of, but that lockout feature can be disabled by hitting the button and holding it. But I'm not super impressed with that. That is one serious advantage to having a back switch, because it's much harder to accidentally hit that back switch. It's also harder to find a side switch when you pull the light out. A back switch, you always know where the back of the light is. It doesn't matter how you're holding it, but on this guy, you don't have that issue. And there's no locating bump or anything like that. On some lights, there's like a flat surface on the front, wherever that switch is, so you just kind of feel, and oh, okay, there it is. Protrudes a little bit, but not so much. Next thing, the larger size on this guy, especially relative to the smaller one, is just not as much fun to carry. Don't get me wrong, it's not terrible by any measure, and I was, very much able to carry this guy. It's fine in a jeans pocket, for instance, but it's heavier, it's bigger, it's a little less pleasant. And coupled with this clip, which makes this light a little bit heavier than it really needs to be, I wasn't a huge fan of EDCing this, especially relative to this smaller guy or relative to a thinner light like this D25A by EDTAC over there. And then the other thing that I got to point out is, although I was just praising this charging system for its nice connection, it does require you to carry another cable if you go traveling and you want to bring this light. So you're not just able to use, for instance, a standard micro USB cable on this guy, like you would on this Phoenix UC35. Instead, you're packing this guy, and that's a little frustrating, and it's one more thing to forget. Pretty much everywhere you can find a micro USB cable, but here, not so much. Then finally, except for runtimes and size, and I kind of touched on this earlier, but it is pretty much indistinguishable from the S1R. You will not really get a major improvement in output. If I'm just using the light for a minute or two, these two lights are functionally identical, and so if you carry this guy around all day, all you're doing is carrying extra runtime. The outputs are very, very similar. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. The output on this guy is just fine, but at the same time, I don't know. It's a little bit weird, especially if you don't end up using your day that much, your light that much in a given day, to have this guy with you. So there you go. That's the bad. They're pretty much indistinguishable in terms of output and light quality. The recharging does require the cable. The larger size isn't as fun to carry. The side switch can go off in your pocket. The interface doesn't thrill me. The output isn't all that great for an 18650 light, and it is yet another damn black flashlight. Let's talk about the ugly here. The ugly here are, well, two things. First off, kind of inherited from my review of the S1, is that I don't love this clip. It's okay, it does the job, but it's connected just by spring tension here. It rotates around very freely, and it adds a fair amount of bulk. I mean, you're not even able to get it right up against your pants pocket, and so a light that is already a little bit thick, like this guy, I don't know, it just doesn't impress me so much. I like the length on it, but that's about it. I would much prefer a more standard clip like this guy, which makes it just carry a little bit smaller on your D25A here. The second issue is, and this is a snobbish issue, I will say this 100%, but the light coming out of this guy is very bluish, greenish, and kind of ugly. It puts a very ugly cast on things, as opposed to the much, and you can even probably see this on camera, this gives a much more natural light to it, a much warmer light, relative to this guy, which is, well, unpleasant. And you also get at the edges of the lens, you get some color distortion. I just don't like the light quality coming out of this guy. The tint is just not great, and so I'd really prefer if they offered this guy in an option with a higher color rendering index, a neutral white sort of a thing. And it's really ugly to me that you can't even pay extra for that, because this would be a really great light in that neutral tint. But as it is, the light coming out of this is just really ugly, and that kind of chases me away. So there's your ugly. The light coming out of it is itself ugly, and the clip is a little bit thick and not so awesome. Let's talk final conclusions here. Final conclusions here. First off, I gotta say, although this is a very solid light, unless you need that extra runtime, unless you need 3 hours on high rather than just 1 hour, honestly, I would lean towards going with the smaller one. In terms of functional performance and the amount of light they're throwing, I would say that this guy has at least 90% of the performance of the big guy in a much more pleasant to carry shape. I don't really enjoy carrying this guy. This is A-okay. No problems whatsoever. The other thing to remember is that you can get more output, better output, prettier color, and better size elsewhere, and you can get more travel-friendly recharging options. This really isn't your only choice for a rechargeable 18650 light. Check out my flashlights playlist for more. But all those disclaimers aside, this really is a fine light. And if you use your light a lot, like every night you're using your light, patrolling a warehouse, or doing whatever it is, on the beat, this is a great choice because that recharge system is really excellent, and it makes it a very, very pleasant user experience. I do wish that they would fix the tint and the clip, but it is absolutely a fine light. So I guess there you go. That's the final conclusion here. It may not be the right choice for everybody, but it is very, very solid, and I have absolutely zero problem recommending this guy for you if you need it. Hope this has been interesting, that it lit up your life and gave you a charge, but mostly that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.